Matthew Evans, a wealthy man in his late 70s, sat alone inside his sleek silver Mercedes, drumming his thumb against the steering wheel with growing impatience. The air conditioner hummed faintly, struggling to combat the heavy Kentucky heat. Retired and prosperous after a long career in finance, Matthew was used to life bending in his favor. But today he found himself stuck with a flat tire, far from the comfort of his immaculate estate on the edge of town. After several failed attempts to reach roadside assistance due to poor reception, he exhaled deeply, accepting that he would have to wait. Just as frustration began to simmer inside him, he noticed someone approaching from down the road, a boy likely around 13 or 14, wearing a faded t-shirt and worn-out sneakers, walking with a determined stride. The boy's eyes narrowed slightly as he surveyed the situation. Then, with a polite but assured nod, he spoke, "Got a flat, sir?" Yes, I do," Matthew answered, feeling a strange blend of relief and discomfort. "I was trying to call for help, but there's no signal out here." The boy offered a small smile. "I can take care of it," he said, kneeling next to the tire without hesitation. "My grandpa showed me how to change a tire last summer. You got a spare?" Matthew gestured toward the trunk, watching as the boy retrieved the tools and got to work. He moved quickly and with quiet confidence, his hands steady and sure, belying his young age. As Matthew stood watching, an unfamiliar sense of humility settled over him, something he hadn't felt in years. He considered offering the boy something in return, but the boy barely looked up, focused completely on the task. Within minutes, the job was done. The boy stood, wiped his hands on his jeans, and said simply, "All finished," with a small, satisfied smile. Matthew reached into his wallet and pulled out a few bills, extending them toward the boy. "Here. Thank you. I really appreciate it." But the boy stepped back, raising a hand politely. "Thanks, sir, but I don't need anything. Glad I could help." Matthew stood frozen, the cash still in hand, as he watched the boy turn and walk back down the road. The encounter left him deeply moved, though he couldn't quite understand why. Alone again, he slipped the money back into his wallet, got into the car, and watched the boy's silhouette shrink in the rearview mirror. During the drive home, Matthew couldn't stop thinking about the boy. There was a quiet strength in him, a sense of self-worth that didn't come from wealth or status, but from something far more profound. That evening, Matthew sat alone in his luxurious home, the image of the boy lingering in his thoughts. He sank into his leather armchair, surrounded by books he rarely opened. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. His dinner, perfectly grilled steak with asparagus, sat untouched on the side table. He had met thousands of people throughout his life, business partners, employees, investors. Every interaction had a purpose, a deal, a favor, a transaction. But this boy, this complete stranger, had offered his help without expecting anything in return. Matthew sipped his scotch slowly, the boy's confident smile playing in his mind again. He didn't look like he came from much. The scuffed shoes, the faded clothes, the dirt-streaked hands all told a story. And yet he walked with a kind of honesty and self-respect that felt incredibly rare. By the next morning, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to find the boy. He wasn't sure if it was gratitude, guilt, or just curiosity, but something within him felt unresolved. He drove back along the same road, scanning every direction for any sign of the boy. Hours passed as he stopped at gas stations and diners, asking around. Most people hadn't seen him or simply shrugged, until an elderly woman behind the counter of a small cafe finally responded. "Sounds like Elijah," she said, drying her hands on her apron. "That boy's always helping someone out around here. Lives with his mama over in Harlan?" "Harlan," Matthew repeated, committing the name to memory. "Thank you." The town of Harlan was about an hour away, nestled in the Appalachian foothills. The drive was scenic, but Matthew barely noticed. His mind was full of questions. What kind of home had raised such a boy? What sort of life did he lead? When he arrived in Harlan, the streets were quiet, lined with humble homes and small local shops. Asking around, he was eventually directed to a small house on the edge of town. The place was worn but well kept, its front porch sagging gently under its own weight. Matthew parked the Mercedes, sat for a moment, then took a deep breath and stepped out. Walking up to the door, he paused briefly, uncertain of what he'd even say. Then he raised his hand and knocked. The door creaked open a moment later. A woman in her early 40s appeared in the doorway. She looked worn out, but there was a warmth in her demeanor. Her eyes, sharp and observant, studied Matthew with quiet curiosity. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Good morning," Matthew responded, clearing his throat. "I hate to intrude, but I believe I met your son yesterday, Elijah, right? He helped me when I had a flat tire." Her expression softened immediately, a gentle smile forming. "That sounds like my Elijah," she said. "He's always lending a hand." "I wanted to thank him properly," Matthew explained. "He wouldn't take anything from me yesterday." She gave a small nod and stepped aside. "He's out back. You're welcome to wait inside." Matthew entered, taking in the home's simple but welcoming interior. The furniture was old but well kept, and the walls were decorated with family photos and children's drawings, likely done by a much younger Elijah. The space, though modest, felt vibrant and full of life, unlike the polished, quiet luxury of his own home. He followed her out to the backyard, where Elijah was busy mending a section of fence. The boy glanced up, clearly surprised to see him. "Hey, mister," Elijah said, brushing his hands off on his jeans. "What are you doing here?" Matthew smiled, oddly nervous. "I just wanted to thank you again. You really helped me out, and I haven't stopped thinking about it." Elijah shrugged, relaxed and sincere. It wasn't a big deal. But to Matthew it had been, and he was determined to make that clear. Elijah leaned casually against the fence, his eyes studying Matthew with quiet interest. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The boy's calm presence made Matthew feel strangely unsettled, as though the roles were reversed and he was the one being evaluated. "I don't think you understand how much it meant," Matthew finally said, breaking the silence. "Most people don't go out of their way to help someone without expecting something in return." Elijah tilted his head, considering the thought. "I don't see it like that," he said simply. "If I could help someone, why wouldn't I?" Matthew was struck by the straightforwardness of his answer. His gaze drifted across the yard, the fence patched together from different pieces of wood, the uneven grass and the rusting swing set behind the house. It was clear they didn't have much, but they made the best of what they did have. "You're a smart kid," Matthew said sincerely. "Your mom must be proud." Elijah grinned and looked back toward the house. "She works hard. I just try to do my part." Matthew stood quietly, letting the boy's words sink in. They stirred memories of his own upbringing, growing up in a modest home, watching his parents work endlessly to get by, instilling in him the value of effort and resilience. Over time, he drifted from those lessons, lost in the chase for status and wealth. "I want to do something for you and your mom," Matthew said finally. Elijah straightened slightly, cautious. "We're okay, mister. We don't need anything." "It's not about need," Matthew said firmly. "It's about doing what's right. You helped me without hesitation. I'd like to return the favor." Before Elijah could respond, his mother stepped out onto the porch, drying her hands with a dish towel. "Elijah, come wash up before lunch," she called. Then turning to Matthew, she added, "Would you like to join us? It's nothing fancy, but you're welcome." Matthew hesitated, unused to such open, unguarded invitations, but the sincerity in her voice left no room to refuse. "I like that," he said, stepping inside with them. The kitchen was filled with the comforting smells of fresh bread and roasted vegetables. The table, small and surrounded by mismatched chairs, was set with care. Matthew sat down, feeling oddly out of place in his tailored suit within these humble surroundings. Elijah washed up at the sink and joined them, his smile easy and genuine. As they ate, Matthew found himself drawn into their conversation. Elijah spoke about school, his friends, and his dream of becoming an engineer. His mother shared stories about the community, her voice full of quiet pride about the neighbors who always looked out for one another. Matthew listened, feeling a warmth he hadn't known in years. For all his material success, his mansion often felt cold and empty. But here, in this modest home filled with kindness and laughter, he felt something richer, something real. After the meal, as they cleared the dishes, Matthew turned to Elijah's mother. "You've done a wonderful job raising him," he said. "He has more heart than most people I know." She smiled, eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you. He's a good boy." Life's thrown us some hard times, but we've learned to value the little things. Matthew nodded, his mind already spinning with ideas. He didn't want to seem patronizing, but he couldn't walk away without doing something meaningful. This family had unknowingly given him a gift, a reminder of what truly mattered. That afternoon, Matthew drove home feeling more focused than he had in years. As he passed through the gates of his estate, he began planning, not out of pity, but out of respect. This wasn't charity. It was a tribute to a boy's quiet generosity and a family's unwavering strength. The next morning, Matthew got on the phone. He had work to do. By midday, Matthew had reached out to contractors and vendors, and a plan was already taking shape. Within a week, trucks and crews began showing up at Elijah's home. Matthew stood out front, clipboard in hand, coordinating the work while Elijah and his mother looked on in stunned silence. "You really didn't have to do this," Elijah's mother said, her voice shaky as she watched workers unload building materials. Matthew turned to her, his face sincere. "You haven't just gotten by, you've flourished. But you gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. Please let me return the favor." Elijah stood beside her, quieter than usual, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Matthew crouched slightly so he could meet the boy's gaze. "You taught me something important, Elijah," he said. "Helping others isn't about wealth. It's about being present. I want to be present for you." Over the next several weeks, the house underwent a complete transformation. The old sagging porch was rebuilt with solid wood, the leaky roof was fixed, and the broken-down swing set was replaced with a brand-new one. Inside, fresh paint coated the walls, the floors gleamed, and the kitchen received a modern upgrade with new appliances. At first, Elijah tried to pitch in, hauling boards, sweeping up dust, but Matthew gently insisted he take a break. "Your only job right now," he said with a grin, "is to enjoy being a kid." Still, Elijah couldn't resist watching the progress. He'd sneak outside to observe the workers, his eyes wide with fascination as they measured, sawed, and hammered. One of the construction workers, a big man named Joe, noticed Elijah's interest and invited him to help with simple tasks like measuring planks. Before long, Elijah was full of questions about tools and techniques, his enthusiasm infectious. Matthew watched from a distance, feeling a pride he hadn't known in a long time. For once, he was doing something that truly mattered, something beyond spreadsheets and quarterly reports. The boy's curiosity and drive reminded him of the passion he once had before life became consumed by deadlines and deals. One evening, as the sun sank below the horizon, the final touches were nearly complete. Elijah and his mother stood on the new porch, marveling at the changes. "This isn't just a house anymore," his mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is a real home. I don't know how we'll ever thank you." Matthew gently shook his head, his voice low and heartfelt. "You've already thanked me. You reminded me of what life's really about, family, connection, and purpose. If anything, I should be the one thanking you." The final day of construction felt more like a celebration than a farewell. Neighbors dropped by to admire the updates, bringing small tokens of appreciation, fresh baked bread, homemade preserves, even a potted plant. Laughter filled the yard as Elijah ran around excitedly, showing his friends the new swing set and the refreshed rooms inside. Matthew stood on the front steps, leaning against the new railing, watching the joyful scene unfold. It had been years since he'd felt this kind of happiness, genuine, simple joy from seeing others flourish. Elijah's mother approached with a glass of iced tea, handing it to him with a grateful smile. "You did more than renovate a house," she said gently. "You gave us hope, and maybe you found some for yourself too." Matthew nodded, taking a slow sip. "I think I did," he admitted. "I spent decades chasing money, titles, influence, but none of it ever made me feel the way this does." As the sun continued to set, Elijah joined them on the porch, still brimming with energy. "Mr. Matthew," he said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking a lot about what you did for us. I want to do something like that one day. I want to help people too." Matthew placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "You already have, Elijah. Your kindness is what started all of this. Never lose that." The three of them sat together, watching the sky change from golden hues to deep shades of orange and red. The air was warm, but the deeper warmth came from a shared sense of purpose, gratitude, and connection. When it was time for Matthew to leave, Elijah and his mother walked into his car. The boy's bright smile and his mother's tearful gratitude stayed with Matthew as he drove away, and he knew this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something new for all of them. In the following weeks, more changes unfolded. Elijah's interest in construction quickly grew into a real passion. Matthew arranged for him to shadow some of the workers who had helped renovate the home. Elijah absorbed everything he could, eager to learn and understand. Matthew found himself returning to Harlan more and more. Each visit felt less like a trip and more like coming home. He no longer saw himself as a stranger in their lives. He was part of their story now. And for the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. This story came full circle in the very place it started, a small town with a big heart, where a young boy's simple act of kindness reminded an old man of life's truest wealth. It's not about what you possess. It's about what you give.